I don't really have any negative feelings toward them, even while they're happening. I just observe it. And I felt that during some of the time when I was too sick to even get up to go to the bathroom without help, I felt that I was engaged in an intense spiritual lesson that was intense because all my attention, I couldn't do anything else, so all my attention was turned inward because I basically, couldn't do anything else. I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't read books, I couldn't, I was so ill I couldn't do anything. And I learned a whole bunch then that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. So that's what struck me is
wonderful points.
Yeah, and these
that's
extreme.
Brilliant. I could talk for that. I could talk about that one subject for like 5 hours. It's very true that, and in a very
true.
basic way, it's the universe saying stop for a moment, and
right.
just to compel that, we'll give you an illness, or we'll break your leg, or we'll give you some awful thing that is a tremendous drama that we can't deny, and there may even be some pain and anxiety with it. But that's all part of the theatre, you see. The higher self isn't too worried about that because it knows that you are this kind of very infinite being, and the very momentary phantom of being who you are, Dr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, and me as Mr. So-and-so, that's all, that's all just a bit of play, really. The important thing is the growth. That's the number one thing. So the universe, from time to time, in conjunction and with consent from our own selves, because it's a free will thing when we get ill, believe it or not.
Right.
I'm sure you know this,
I agree with that. I think it is. Yeah.
It's a free will exercise, becoming ill, and it's always a way of showing you something about what's occurring. So when I get ill, and I injured my back the other day, and I was laid up for days, and I thought, well, that's funny, because I thought I was doing quite well, and I thought I was starting to get to some very interesting things on that particular week. And next minute, click, and that was it. I had to lie horizontal for 3 days, which wasn't particularly enjoyable because I couldn't really get comfortable. But then suddenly I remembered this principle and thought, okay, so what's going on here? And I started to realize that my higher facility was saying, the thing you're looking at is good, but you need to just park that over there for a minute, in that mental parking lot, and just put that down. And this is more prescient. This is more relevant right now. You need to look at this. Oh, and by the way, don't forget the body. The body is as much an important reflection of your spirit as your mind is, and you're neglecting yours a little bit. So just to give you a reminder of that, I'm going to show you what it's like to have a disability.
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of things that all came up. And admittedly, it was my conception of it was dim during the process. But as I started to realize what was going on, there was almost a correlation with that and the pain going away and the muscle healing itself. So fortunately, it wasn't a serious issue, but it was extremely debilitating. But it seemed that the more conscious I became of what was really going on at the root, the more the illness subsided. And then at the end of it, one hopefully makes some, draws some conclusions and makes some commitments to think, right, I get what that is now. I'm not going to need to repeat that again because I'm going to change my consciousness permanently. That line of code has been edited now, and I'm not going to repeat that same ignorance again. And that's okay. It's totally okay. It's just like the teacher coming up and saying, hey, you got that one wrong. You need to come back later on and have another go at that. So it's like the universe is taking an interest. It's not a punishment. The universe is giving you attention and saying, hey, I love you. Let's take a look at this again. So it's always a good thing if you can keep that high perspective. As you say, you become the witness in your own growth rather than the subject of it, which is always a stronger position.
Yeah, that's what happened. Both of these times before the event happened, I was warned about it by other clairvoyants. Through my grandmother, who is in spirit, my grandmother would come through them and say, you need to stop everything you're doing, take 2 weeks off and just do nothing. And of course, I'm a plastic surgeon, and I have patients from all over the world. They have plane tickets. They're booked in advance. This is not something that I can do without really pissing a lot of people off. But yet, my higher self knows that I have to rest, because if I don't, in one case I was going to get lung cancer, and in another case I was probably run down enough to get this viral pneumonia. So in any case, when I broke my arm, I ended up not getting lung cancer because I rested for 4 months. And with the other one, I was out for 5 weeks. But in each time, I knew that it was exactly perfect the way it came down, because all of the patients with plane tickets and hotel reservations, and these are people who are really pretty ill that are coming in. This isn't for cosmetic surgery. These are infected breast implant patients. Some of them extremely ill, coming even from England and France and Philippines and Japan. I take New Zealand. I take care of patients from all over the world.
So it's not
but
like
I had to break my arm because I couldn't just call them up and say, I have to cancel your surgery. You see, I knew that was the only way that it would happen. Does that make sense? I had to have an emergency.
It does, because the things that we think are important actually are not important. But if you ask 1,000 people, is this important? Everyone will say yes, and then you'll believe it, and then you'll think yes.
Right.
And society says yes, these things are very important. You're doing something valuable. It's helping people. It's saving lives. You're creating wellness in communities.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. Actually, it isn't. Nothing that we do here has any importance in the way that we think it does. And that's the thing that gets in the way of seeing things truly. So all those things, like my father in his work, he's just started to realize that now at 66, just as he's retiring, he started to realize that his professional life, and he has a super duper job, he's very well recognized in what he does and stuff, he realizes that it's kind of like a game, really. And ultimately, it's illusory, absolutely illusory. It doesn't matter whether you're the most talented surgeon or the most fabulous, violinist or attorney or whatever, astronaut. It's meaningless. It's all a game. It's a theater.
Right.
It's like an arbitrary role that you pull out of a hat and say, oh, I'm an astronaut. Oh, I'm a street cleaner. Oh, right, okay. They're all essentially of equal meaningless value. And yet, it's not what we do, it's how we do it. So that's the key thing. So what you find yourself doing in life, your work, whether that's paid or unpaid, that's irrelevant, but your workings in life are there to teach you how to be, how to conduct your consciousness, and how to understand the effects of your consciousness on the world around you. So it's never the what, it's the how. So sometimes the universe has to come and give us a little helping hand in that by stopping certain things occurring and thereby shifting our perspective to look at things afresh and think, hang on a second, although that seemed important, it wasn't really. You talk to an old person about that. You talk to a 70, 80, 90-year-old lady and say, what's important in life? Very wise words come out of those mouths, and they have a view on that, nearing the end of their mortality, that is very healthy. Yeah. And they say, well, it's people, it's experiences, it's laughter, it's wisdom, it's divinity, it's God. These are the important things. They don't talk about the things that we talk about in the middle of our lives, shall we say. They talk about something else. And I take heed of that, will come across that, and try and integrate that into my life as a 40-year-old and say, well, don't miss this. Don't start to come to it when you're 90. Put it in now. Put that wisdom in place right now.
Yeah, that is important. And when you are, when you were in the bed, uncomfortable with the back injury, and when I was, really couldn't do anything because I had pneumonia, and you just can't do anything with pneumonia, not eat or even get up by yourself when you're that sick. I think that our ego or our the day-to-day self that we identify with, really, there's an opportunity to just let that go. And I really believe that during that time of my greatest, I guess, challenges, I had the experience of being one with a higher level of myself, a more wise level, a more...
We are getting over ourselves in the midst of our illness, aren't we? We're
yeah.
transcending self, because self is being dissolved by the illness, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm really ill, and what's left of me? When that goes away, surprise, surprise, this great spirit surfaces, which connects us with the entirety. You're absolutely right, and that's
and I had the
well worth
real
our consideration.
I had the thought that if that higher part of myself had not come into my body and taken over, that I would have died. And not with the broken arm, but with pneumonia. And in fact, I called up my spiritual father at the time, and I asked him, "Am I going to die?" Because I thought I might. My oxygen, I was on oxygen and IVs in my home because I'm a doctor and I can do all that, which is very nice. I don't have to go to the hospital. But I was on oxygen, and even on oxygen, my oxygen was very low. So I asked him, am I going to die? And he said, no, but you're going to feel like you're going to die. And looking back on it, I think that meant that my lower self was dying. Meanwhile, my higher self was coming into my body, and it was actually necessary to come in order for me to survive. It was bringing an energy with it that allowed me to get through that. And it was just a very interesting experience.
It is a fascinating experience, particularly if you can keep that healthy philosophical perspective during it. Usually afterwards we can sometimes see the wisdom, but if you can do it during it, that's very valuable. That particular thing you're describing in some European traditions is called the flame of the phoenix, where our little self is sort of reduced to ashes, but from those ashes, something greater surfaces. And it's like an identity crisis, isn't it, when you're ill? There's like an old Buddhist thing that says, if I chop your finger off, are you any less you? And you're like, well, not really,
Not really.
Well, if I chop both your arms and legs off, are you any less you? And they say, well, there's less body, obviously, but not any less, right? So what is it that's you? Where is that thing? Is it in your head? Is it your brain? Well, not really, no. So you can start to see then from a very rudimentary point of view, but the body isn't really housing you at all. It's not like you're in the body at all. When you understand that at an inner level, you don't really need to invest in the body in quite the same way. You can treat it as a beautiful art project, is what I often think of it, like life itself and the body as a beautiful art project where you want it to be beautiful, you want it to be good, you want it to be interesting, you want it to have some, vivaciousness about it. You don't want it to be drab and rubbish. You want it to be good. So you treat it well, and you have obviously a very fond relationship with it, but you know that you're not it. And so even, having a tremendous pain or whatever, if you can keep that frame of mind, you can see through it, and you can start to interpret it just as a chemical signal, not as a threatening experience, but as something excellent fundamentally, which that is, again, collapsing polarity to say, right, we're starting to see that negative isn't really bad, and we're starting to see that positive isn't really good. So someone who leads a blissful, happy life, skipping through the tulips every day, I feel sorry for them, because I know that there's no growth in that kind of life. There's no knowingness in that.
Right.
There's no contact with truth in that kind of life. It's just a sedation living like that. It's very nice and everything, and we all need it a little bit, but to make that a pursuit just to live in bliss is pointless. That's not what we're here for. We're here for growth.
It reminds me of something Christian Mute said when he was dying of cancer. Somebody asked him, how he was doing, and he said, there is pain, but there is no suffering. It reminds us that suffering is of the lower self. And pain, like you say, is just a chemical signal.
Yeah, what is suffering? Suffering is resistance to the dissolution of something.